Hey everybody, I'm Amani, your astrological karmic life coach, and today I'm talking all about Mars transiting in Sagittarius. And I like to go in depth in all that I do, and all of my interpretations, especially when it comes to Venus, Mercury, Sun transits and everything really, are based on Vedic astrology, which is based on where the planets or the luminaries, which are the sun and the moon, are at any given time in the sky. And all times are in GMT time as well. So yeah, thanks for listening. And yeah. So Mars entered out of bounds in Scorpio on the 27th of November 2025 at 10:48 p.m. and I'm telling you this because Mars is still out of bounds when it goes into Sagittarius on the 7th of December at 3:48 p.m. until the 4th of January at 5:57 p.m. when Mars leaves out of bounds but stays in Sagittarius, right, until the 15th of January at 10:59 p.m. when Mars enters Capricorn. So out of bounds in astrology just means that planet's energy acts a bit more wilder, but I'm going to talk all about that in a while. And the theme for this transit is wild warrior energy that gets unleashed, right? Yeah. So Sagittarius, as you know, is a fire sign, and it gives us sort of like untethered, wild, as I said, chaotic because it's out of bounds, warrior action, so we're in fighter, battle, visionary combat mode, and it allows us to be kind of like more philosophical and on a mission. So Mars out of bounds, mutable, fire energy, Sagittarius is wanting us to just break free, supporting us in breaking free from our limitations. So at the time of Mars going into Sagittarius this year, taking us up until the 15th of January 2026, right, it's making a quincunx with Jupiter, a square with Saturn, a trine with Chiron, a square with Neptune, a quincunx to the moon as well, and a conjunction to the sun, right? So I'm going to talk all about what that means in depth. I'm going to do summary, then go in depth later. So it's a reality testing, allowing us to heal as well, but Mars' square to Neptune brings confusion because Neptune can always make us escape into our intoxicating habits, whether it's overeating, drinking too much alcohol, taking drugs, partaking in toxic hookups and all of that. So we've got to watch out for, the Neptune energy in this. Also, we've got the quincunx of the moon telling us that we need to adjust our emotions as well. But the sun's conjunction to Mars really increases our energy slowly, which is good. So Mars is out of bounds, as I said, for the first 4 weeks of this transit. It gives us like breakthrough courage, where we're sort of like being activated to, like I said, free ourselves from the limitations. And it's a nice energy as we go into the final 3 to 4 weeks of this year, right? So good for letting go of toxic relationships, anything that's like stopping you from your growth, reviewing your daily routines, breaking free from the normal limitations and rules of your life, right? We've also got a T-square between the midheaven, Chiron, the moon and Jupiter, and so this kind of creates a focus on our career, but Chiron brings healing, Jupiter makes us question our beliefs and can also add to the tension, right? And then we've got the grand trine between the moon, Jupiter, Mercury and Saturn and Neptune, and this creates mental, emotional, sort of like structural flow. So we've got Saturn here grounding this wild Mars out of bounds energy, which is really good for us, right? So Mars in Sagittarius is already the cosmic warrior philosopher, shooting arrows towards distant horizons, right? Going after adventure, fighting for belief systems, thinking outside of the box, using trusting our higher mind, taking action based on faith rather than calculation and logic. That's what Sagittarius energy is all about. It's the creator, it's the crusader, it's the fighter, it's the explorer, the freedom fighter who acts first and thinks later, if at all. So out of bounds, we may act and react. So I sort of ask you, if you want to blow your house down, then do that. But I would recommend you do some thinking, because you don't want to let go of relationships or maybe a career or job that you shouldn't let go of right about now, right? So as I said, when a planet goes out of bounds, it moves beyond the sun's declination, which is, basically beyond 23.27 degrees or latitude north and south. And basically all you need to know is that it moves beyond the boundaries that normally contain planetary behavior. So basically Mars acting out of bounds, unregulated and uncontrolled, is basically, like teenagers who moved out of their parents' house for the first time. The rules no longer apply, and they're testing just how far they can push their newfound freedom, right? When we go off to college and university, whatever you want to call it, we first just get out into the world and we're like, oh, this is great, until when we realise when we get our own place, right, there's bills to be paid and we do need a bit of rules, right? But anyway, Mars out of bounds in Sagittarius is the warrior who's escaped the barracks, the philosopher who's abandoned, the dogma, the rigid belief system, the inflexible rules, and the sort of my way or the highway thinking and belief structures that a lot of us are born into, right, that we're not allowed to question. So when Mars is out of bounds, it's like the explorer who's throwing away the map. The archer shooting arrows in every direction just to see where they land. But there's wisdom here. Genuine breakthrough action, courageous leaps, freedom from limiting beliefs about what's possible. As I said, this is a good energy as we're going, into 2026 to rethink, the things you want to take into 2026 with you. But as I said, there's also a danger because we can be reckless. We can do too much. We can overextend ourselves, thinking we can take on more responsibilities or more stuff than we can. We can be kind of fanatic about our ideology right now. We can be like, oh, you have to believe this, and if you don't believe this, my way's the right way, and all of that. And we can have confidence, but it's the confidence that can make us walk straight off cliff because, it's convinced us that we can fly. So as I said, we have to be careful, right? So Mars stays in Sagittarius until the 15th of January. So it's giving us approximately 5.5 weeks of this energy, right? So at first it's going to be exceptionally intense for the first 4 weeks while Mars is out of bounds, right? But for the final 1.5 weeks after the 4th of January, when Mars returns within bounds, we can kind of settle into more manageable territory with our Mars energy. And remember, Mars controls our drives, right? So our sex drive, our physical exercise drive, our motivation to get up out of bed in the morning and all of that as well. So Mars is very important. And the quincunx to Jupiter, even though it's starting to separate, gives us that kind of push to do too much as well. So we just need to watch out for that, right? Mars and Jupiter together in this quincunx is telling us go bigger or go home, more action, more risk, more belief, more everything. The quincunx energy means that the growth, can be awkward during this time and unsustainable. That's why I said it's really important to think before you act and react, right? And we can do things that misalign with reality, right? Yeah, you may want to quit your job, but if you end up homeless because you can't pay your bills, it's all about making a steady plan, right? As I said, for some of you, you may have to do things in a kind of forceful way, otherwise you won't do it. But like I said, you think about your limitations and what you can handle. So some of you may be entering the energy of Mars transiting in Sagittarius out of bounds, having just overcommitted, overextended or overpromised more than you can deliver. And Mars in Sagittarius out of bounds can keep you going that way, but it may not be sort of like realistic. So Mars is square to Saturn brings a immediate reality check, right? With Saturn being in Pisces saying your grand plans, let's check if they're actually viable, whether they're sustainable and you can carry them out, right? And this can create frustration because Mars out of bounds in Sagittarius wants no limits, but Saturn insists on some limits, right? And the friction between boundless action, Mars, and necessary constraint represented by Saturn will define the first week of this transit. And Mars is trying to Chiron, offers grace and peace, right? Chiron represents the wounded healer, right? And the trine means healing action can flow more naturally. So it's giving us the ease to let go of things and to be gentle with ourselves and do some positive self-care, right? And, whatever wounds you've been carrying around, failing to act on them, failing to manage them and understand them and forgive yourself and others and have empathy while doing so, or whether you've been failing to pursue, go after your truth, failing to fight for what you believe in, this transit can heal all of that through you doing that, right? Through you deciding to manage your psychological, emotional and spiritual wounds, living your truth and fighting for and standing up for what you believe in, right? So Mars is trying to Chiron allows us to do this, not just by talking about doing, not planning to do, but through actually doing, right? It wants us to actually take action. So think of it like spring floodwaters breaking through a dam, an unstoppable force meeting an inadequate kind of like container, right? Because the dam's not working, the barrier where the water is meant to be held is not working, right? Mars out of bounds is allowing us to go through those limits, and Saturn grounding it is, telling us to check ourselves before we wreck ourselves and blow our house down, but it's still supporting us going towards the new, right? The question isn't whether the water will flow, it's whether you've got channels, the right routines, prepared to direct the flow constructively, the energy constructively in a productive way, right? Or whether it's just going to destroy everything in its path because it's pure chaotic force. So it's important to make a plan. And even though, the Mars out of bound energy wants us to do everything all at once, I suggest making a plan, but also, letting go of anything that's holding you back, right? So positively, Mars transit in Sagittarius gives us the courage that lets us act on goals that others consider impossible. It allows us to take visionary action, going after the things that we couldn't have imagined attempting before this transit. It wants us to fight for justice, truth, or, principles, our beliefs with the unusual intensity that doesn't quit, right? You don't give up on yourself, you don't give up on what you believe in. I will say respect other people's boundaries, respect that other people have their beliefs as well, but at the same time, be assertive and don't let others overstep your boundaries as well. It allows us to take physical adventures, whether that be travel, sports, exploration, with exceptional courage, right? It allows us to start ambitious projects that seem too big or too risky before, we can teach or lead through demonstration. So living what we believe rather than just talking about it and having theories on it, right? Showing others how it's done, So I love the time people say, oh, I would do this, I would do that, but never do it. So this energy is wanting us to put our money where our mouth is, to actually walk our talk, right? So we can speak difficult truths with the courage and conviction that, being truthful requires, ending years of silence for some of you on issues. Some of you may, it's the season, December, family and all of that. You may actually say, I don't want to come this Christmas, or I'm not doing this, or I'm not doing that. It's wanting us to stand up for ourselves. We can also, really focus on our physical exercising as well, because, Mars rules all our drives, right? As it can help us to go beyond our normal limits, but make sure you take rest to avoid burnout and do your stretches and all of that, some Tai Chi, yoga, whatever, Pilates to, stretch those muscles. You can inspire others through courageous, actions. Your courage can become kind of like contagious to those around you, so people can follow your lead. You can act on faith before the evidence appears, trusting your vision enough to move towards it. You can break through limiting beliefs about your own capacities and abilities, about what's achievable, right? You can channel your aggression or anger into constructive plans rather than destructive explosion. So when Mars is out of balance in Sagittarius, energy works well. You kind of like decide to, pursue, go after, make progress on one meaningful goal with exceptional sort of like focus and courage. You got adventure planned with the proper safety rules. You write everything down, you make allowances for days when you can't do as much as the others, and getting back up after each failure as you try to break into your new routine or whatever you choose to do, right? You can sort of like fight for causes that genuinely serve others, not just your own ego, and your honesty includes empathy and compassion for yourself and others, right? You also take calculated risks rather than reckless gambles, and your vision inspires others whilst your actions demonstrate what's achievable, right? But in its negative expressions and sort of like its shadow, right, you can kind of like have reckless confidence that underestimates genuine risk and overestimates your ability, right? So as I said, make sure that you really make a plan to think about what you can achieve. Don't overextend yourself, don't overpromise, right? Be realistic, and Saturn's helping us with that reality check, right? Our fanaticism, our rigid beliefs, about our ideology, and where our beliefs become crusades and all about, my way or the highway, and we just see anyone who disagrees with what we believe in as the enemy. So you just have to watch out for that, right? You can say yes to everything, as I said, committing to too much at the same time. So I said, take one meaningful thing and focus on it. Of course, some of you may be able to do 2 or 3 things, but it's up to you to realize what's in your ability, right? Be brutally honest, yes, but being brutally honest in a way that don't have compassion and empathy and respecting other people's boundaries can damage relationship through, the kind of like rough, tactless, harsh delivery of opinions. So yes, speak your truth, but also read the room as well, and have some empathy. Even if you got to say something harsh, right, there's ways that you can say and do things, right? You can fight unnecessary battles because Mars out of balance loves combat for the sake of it, right? So just watch out for that. As I said, be careful of physical, emotional, spiritual, or any type of burnout, right? From operating at an unsustainable intensity, taking on too much, and, the ones when you do something for a week or 2 and then you burn yourself out, so you have to take 5, 6, 7 weeks off doing the new routine. So it's best to do 5 minutes a day sometimes, and build up slowly rather than doing that 5 hours a day. Only be able to do that for a week and then taking 7, 8 weeks, sometimes months out, right? So planning, and also going at your own pace, not comparing your journey to anyone else's, but your own pace, right? We can also be financially reckless, gamble too much, overinvest in unresearched ideas. So make sure you do your research and never gamble more than you can afford to lose, right? And we've all got different limits, finances, of what we can lose and what we can gamble and all of that, right? So it's important to be realistic and honest about your speculation and what you invest in. You can also impose your truth on others through force, manipulation, or self-righteous superiority as well. So watch out for that, and others can be aggressive and all of that. So, walk away, and as I said, just as you can powerfully believe in what you believe in, others can too. It's about trying to find middle ground, living in that living, meaning, allow others to have their beliefs, because we're all allowed to have our beliefs. And I know, some beliefs are harmful, I understand that completely, but there comes a point when we can't really change other people's mind. If we are wanting them to be more open-minded and less aggressive, we have to model that behaviour by being open-minded and less aggressive. And that doesn't mean we let people walk all over us or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying. It's about not reacting in the ways that you're telling them not to react, because then you're not showing them that, being non-aggressive or anything else is possible, right? So, as I said, don't promise more than you can deliver, because you can fail in a big way when reality kind of catches up to you. So just try and be careful about what you commit to. You can also get angry at any limitations, people saying no, not having the right resources and stuff. You can rage against limitations rather than working within them wisely. Of course, there's not endless resources for everybody, right? And that doesn't mean that has to stop your journey. You just have to try to think about, what can I do with what I have, right? Rather than not doing anything or beating yourself up. If you want to get your money up or something like that, think about realistic ways in your capability, not anyone else, how you can do that, and give yourself the time and space and grace to do so, right? And also watch out for using constant action, so always working to avoid feeling emotions or dealing with actual inner work, that shadow work, looking after your psychological and emotional and spiritual needs. So when Mars's energy becomes difficult, you find yourself scattered across 12 different directions and ideas, starting everything and finishing nothing. You overcommit financially, socially and professionally, and you can collapse under self-created overwhelm, and your honesty can destroy relationships because you're speaking without considering the impact. You go after your visions and plans that have no basis in reality, chasing illusions. This is why it's really important to lean into that Saturn energy and to strategically plan and be realistic about the time you are going to take to complete things, because sometimes we can get disheartened and give up when we say, we got to do something in 1 month, what realistically would take a year to complete. And then because we give ourselves those impossible targets, then we get disillusioned, right? Also look after your body, because you can just burn out your body because you can't stop moving. So take the right rest, and also try to be chilled out of it, because Mars out of balance could make us so aggressive and manipulative and that, and people can avoid you because your intensity is overwhelming. So some people love intensity, some people don't. Read your audience in the room and respect other people's boundaries. Still be yourself, as I said, be assertive, state your needs, but have empathy for others as well. So that's the end of the summary version. Yeah, that was the summary version. Now I'm going to go in depth, talking more about how Mars transiting in Sagittarius will affect our real life in terms of our financial and material security, on the political, social and collective level, how it will affect us on the psychological, creative and spiritual level in more depth. I'm going to also talk more about the aspects that Mars is making as it goes into Sagittarius. Also going to talk more about the karmic meanings and soul lessons, how it affects our relationships. Also going to give you some self-reflection questions that can help you really question yourself during Mars's transit in Sagittarius and help you with that shadow and inner work. So yeah, stay with me for all that good stuff. Okay, so as I said earlier, Mars out of bounds creates exceptional capacity for us taking breakthrough action, but also there can be a genuine risk of self-destruction for us being reckless, right, and not caring about anything and not being realistic on our sort of limitations, staying up all night, 7 nights in a row, not getting sleep, being reckless with our words and stuff. However, we can achieve what normally seems impossible, but the difference is in whether we channel this this kind of warrior energy consciously towards meaningful goals, or just let it explode randomly, right? So, as I said, we just need to watch out for what we are doing with it. So in terms of our financial and material security, it wants us to take financial risk based on vision rather than calculation. And when we add the out of bounds energy into this, it means that we can become capable of brilliant entrepreneurial leaps, or, we can also make losses in a devastating way. So, for instance, if you are self-employed or entrepreneurial, this transit supports courageous moves, launching that product, starting that plan to set up your own side hustle, business, whatever, pitching that ambitious idea, investing in education or marketing, that positions you as an expert, right? It gives you the courage to put yourself out there financially, and this can just pay off through the sheer audacity and timing. Sometimes you may think, I don't have the skills, but just for the fact of being brave, putting yourself out there, someone may just invest in you, so, do that pitch, send those emails, send your CV, your portfolio and whatever to loads of people on LinkedIn and employers, and apply to loads of jobs. You never know what you may get, right? Because it gives us that fearlessness to go and do what we need to do. But as I said, watch out for over-investing in ideas without proper research. Saying yes to financial commitments that you can't sustain, or spending money on adventures and courses or opportunities that drain your resources without generating a return, right? Mars out of bounds doesn't calculate the odds, it's just bets, it just pushes us to do things, and this can pay off, don't get me wrong, but as I said, don't gamble, don't risk more than you can afford to lose, right? Because sometimes the gamble works and often it doesn't, right? So I would say the best approach would be to take one calculated financial risk during this period, not 12 gambles all at once, right? One well-researched leap, do that. Consult someone practical, a Saturn type person, so this can be through a podcast, a family friend, a family member, a partner, or whatever, or as I said, reading a book or some other resource, right? Before making major money moves. Channel your visionary optimism through realistic planning. You can try and gain income from teaching, coaching, travel writing, adventure-based work, or international business can really get a boost right now, opportunities that involve these. Your ability to inspire others and demonstrate expertise and sell vision becomes exceptional right now. Use this, but deliver on what you promise. Mars out of bounds over promises easily, so make sure you can actually fulfill your commitments, right? On the social, political and collective level, as I said earlier, collectively ideological warfare can intensify, because Mars out of bounds can create more crusader, freedom fighter energy and fanatics, people willing to fight to the death for their beliefs. And when everyone's Mars energy is untethered at the same time, because it's affecting us all collectively, right? Political discussion and discourse can become explosive. Social justice movements can gain progress, right, through bold and courageous action and courageous leadership. People stop talking about change and start making change, which is good. Protests, demonstrations, direct action can all increase right now, and this can create positive social transformation, but it can also bring dangerous instability, right? Depending on how we consciously channel this energy. As I said, military and diplomatic overreach can become likely, right? Nations can take aggressive action based on ideological decisions rather than strategic calculation. International tensions can rise as various different parties assert their version of truth with militant certainty. We've seen it a lot, people getting divisive. My belief is better than yours, your way of living is wrong and you should live like this, or you shouldn't be in this country, you should go back to this, and all of this is going on. So this can be intensified, right? There can be an increase in travel disruption, storms, political instability. and infrastructure failures affecting flights and border crossings, because we've seen this when Cloudflare went down a couple of weeks ago, at the time of me recording this, and we couldn't access websites and stuff, So, it's also making us, think about backup plans, what happens when technology goes down. So thinking about investing in skills that are lifelong, maybe some of you may go back to trade school, plumber, electrician, because, we can all work in technology, but what happens when, technology goes down? So it's about having a plan B, without being too crazy about it and off-griddy about it, but, being realistic. Educational institutions can face conflicts around what they're teaching, the methods they teach, and whether, they should teach certain things, which we've seen, but this can intensify. So things around what should students learn, who should decide what students learn, and because Mars in Sagittarius fights these battles with unusual intensity because it's out of bounds, people can get really talkative and pushy on what should be taught in schools and that, but not only that, in general, who should believe what on the personal level. But your personal work is to choose one cause worth fighting for and direct your energy there. Don't scatter your energy across every injustice. Pick the one that genuinely matters to you and take long-term action, right? Attend meetings, organise events, write letters, so what? Mars out of bounds can create real change if focused, but it can also create chaos if scattered, right? Psychologically, we can experience manic energy and have difficulty resting because of constant mental activity, right? You can also be irritated at anything you feel slow or boring. Your tolerance for limitation drops to zero because Mars out of bounds, as I said. So it's making us want to do things now. And anything that prevents you from doing what you want triggers, disproportionate rates. Obviously, this is more apt if you've got oppositions in your chart and squares to, say, Uranus, Mars, maybe the Sun and Saturn as well. It can be sort of like tension. And obviously, if you've got strong 1st, 5th, 8th house placements even as well. So this can also manifest as breakthrough confidence, which is good. This is what you want to do with this, where you finally believe you're capable of your goals, the ones that you only dreamed about. But as I said, it can manifest as delusional confidence, where you believe you're capable of things that are not genuinely achievable. Then you can kind of crash when reality comes in, because we've got the square to Neptune. That adds to the confusion as well. You can't see clearly where you're going or why, as the Mars square Neptune can make us pursue, go after illusions, ignore red flags, lie to others, be manipulated by others and want to manipulate as well. We can also fight imaginary enemies. A Saturn person or someone who's reasonable at the time can be you can't do this, but then it's double-edged sword, because sometimes people say you can't do things because it's outside of their comfort zone and they can't do it as well. So it's finding that balance between reality. Like I said, planning is really important, because Mars is square to Neptune can make us act on fantasies that have no basis in reality. So it's important to verify our goals with trusted people who can be honest. Think about also, are you going after something real or just a projection? On the creative level, this transit is brilliant for brave, bold, visionary work that breaks traditions and what's in the mainstream. It's out of the box kind of work can be done because Mars is out of bounds, right? So creatively and psychologically, it wants us to break the trends, and we can just not be interested in safe, commercial, or what is trending, right? Especially when it comes to art and creativity. You may want to create something that matters, that says something that challenges. Use this energy, make the work you've been afraid to make, say what you've been afraid to say, but make sure you finish whatever it is you start. As I said earlier, Mars in Sagittarius energy can like beginning things and projects, but it can, not like the detailed, the planning, the routine, the doing it every daily that makes us complete things, right? So force yourself to follow through on at least one creative project during these 5.5 weeks. Prove you can finish, not just start. Spiritually, you're being asked to embody, live out principles through action rather than just studying them, as I said earlier. Don't just read about courage, be courageous. Don't just discuss compassion, act empathetically and compassionately, right? Don't just learn about your path, walk it. Mars out of bounds in Sagittarius learns through doing, not contemplating. So in terms of the shadow spirituality, right, we have to watch out for becoming too self-righteous, know it all, my path is the only way kind of talk, getting fanatical, as I said, imposing your beliefs on others, or using spiritual language to justify aggressive behaviour, like, I'm just speaking my truth, which can be called for I'm being a arsehole, Truth without compassion is just cruelty, it's not good. So now I'm going to talk a bit more in depth about the aspects that Mars is making. So as I said, Mars is making a quincunx to Jupiter, and it's at 0-10% separating, so it's still quite strong, right? But it's separating energy. Again, it can make us do too much, so we have to restrain ourselves and reset ourselves, and we have to watch out for too many promises, too much action, too much vision, too much belief, too many directions at the same time. The quincunx adds and creates the awkward tension that demands that we change our actions, which is represented by Mars, and our faith in possibilities, represented by Jupiter, are pulling in directions that don't naturally align, right? So you probably may say yes to opportunities without considering whether you actually had the capacity, or made promises, based on optimistic timelines that reality won't support. So the best use of this energy is to pull back before adding anything new, audit everything that you committed in November and this year, and think about which things on your list are genuinely important, what were driven by enthusiasm and over promising and impulses, and release what isn't essential so you can actually deliver on what matters. So ultimately, Mars's quincunx to Jupiter is a warning that you are at capacity, think about any additional action which can tip you into the collapse of failure, so watch where you're directing your energy. But Mars is square to Saturn, as I said, is at 1 degree applying, and this peaks mid-December, so from about the 12th to the 20th, right? And this adds action, meeting, immovable limitation, and it tests our reality, as I said. Saturn says no, or not yet, or not like that. And Mars, out of bounds, wants to charge ahead without constraints, and this adds to the frustration. You want no limits, but Saturn insists on some limits, right? Saturn in Pisces brings spiritual discipline, realistic idealism, and the necessary boundaries that we need, while also having faith, because faith is very important, right? And every big plan that we have gets checked for actual viability, right? Such as, can you really afford this adventure, this gift, this, I don't know, new car, new house, new jumper, whatever it is you want? Do you actually have the skills for that ambitious project? Is this vision grounded in reality or pure fantasy? So the first week of this transit, the 7th to the 14th of December, can really feel really limited. You can encounter obstacles, delays, or direct refusals that block the action you want to take. People can say no, resources can be unavailable, timing cannot work, and reality can impose upon your vision, So for example, say you want to quit your job and travel for 6 months. Mars out of bounds says, do it, yay! But Saturn says, how will you afford it? What about your flat, your home, your commitments, your responsibilities, And the friction between desire and constraint creates either wise caution or frustrated rage, depending on how you respond. The best use of this energy is to remember Saturn isn't your enemy. It's your guardian, protecting you from genuinely dangerous overreach, And when Saturn blocks your action, your plans, ask, is this resistance protecting me from something I haven't considered? So think, but don't overthink, right? Because sometimes the answer is yes. Sometimes you haven't considered. That's all what Saturn wants us to do. Sometimes we're like, yay, I want to be a millionaire, or yeah, I want to be a pop star. But do you have the dedication to follow through in your plan? So Saturn's not telling us you can't have your dreams. It's saying, make a realistic plan and also have a backup plan just in case, right? So let Saturn slow you down enough to choose wise action over impulsive action. Build a routine around your vision so it can actually manifest instead of just exploding chaotically, right? Mars is trying to Chiron, adds healing action that flows naturally and effortlessly. So as I said, Chiron at the final degrees of Pisces, the 29th degrees, represents the ultimate wound of spiritual separation, feeling disconnected from meaning, purpose, or a divine source. And this trine means that action can heal the wound, right? So taking part in the emotional, psychological, and spiritual development, healing, and forgiveness that I was talking about, continuing or starting that work, whatever fear, shame, or limitation you've been carrying around, taking action or facing the truth around not being brave enough, not, speaking your truth and standing in it, not fighting for what you believe, not standing up for yourself. This transit can heal it through doing, not through therapy, though therapy can help, right? Not through understanding, although understanding matters, but through actually, taking that brave action that proves your fear wrong. For instance, if you always believed I'm not brave, I'm not courageous, taking one genuinely brave action during this transit, speaking up in a meeting, setting a boundary with family or whoever, applying for that intimidating opportunity begins healing that wound, right? And this trine makes it easier than usual. Courage flows more naturally instead of requiring more massive effort. Chiron in Pisces shows that we can heal through surrender and faith and spiritual practice right now. So, we can really get benefit from yoga, tai chi, martial arts, dance, or any embodied practice that combines action with spiritual intention. So Pilates, meditation, research, and more, right? And your body can become a vehicle for healing when you move it with consciousness. The best use of this energy is to identify one fear-based limitation that's held you back and take action despite it. Keep the action small enough that you'll actually do it, but significant enough that it matters. Then let the natural flow of this trine support you, and you'll discover the fear was overblown and your capacity, your ability, your skill is greater than you believed, And, if you do lack skills, you can take the time to learn it, right? It's never too late to learn. A lot of the time you get to certain ages and think, we can't do this or that because of our age as well. And Mars is square to Neptune, which is 5.9 degrees applying, as I said, as confusion, illusion, and fog around our motivation and direction. Neptune can make everything unclear. You can't see where you're going or why you're going there. So we can just, as I said, pursue mirages, fantasies, lies and manipulation, right? Illusions, fighting imaginary enemies, acting on fantasies that have no basis in reality, or just exhausting ourselves from chasing visions that dissolve. When we examine them or when we get there, we see that, we're just wasting our time. So, because this square is wide at a 5-degree orb, it builds slowly throughout the transit rather than hitting suddenly. And as I said, all of these transits energies, because they were, the present when Mars was going into Sagittarius, will flavour the whole 5.5 weeks, influence the Mars energy. So by late December, we can find ourselves questioning whether the goals we've been going after with such passion actually matter, or you may discover they were never real to begin with, just petty and pretty illusions you convince yourself were destinations. And Neptune in Pisces can be, a spiritual vision or an escapist delusion, because there's always two sides to every energy. At its best, Neptune can bring us up to those spiritual highs, but it can also take us into addictive lows and drives us to over-consume drugs and alcohol and intoxicating experiences in people. Mars's energy can motivate us to reach our goals, but it can also make us aggressive and focus too much of our energy on one area, whether it be over-exercising, having too much love-making and stuff. And yes, there is a thing called too much love-making. I know it can be hard if you're addicted to sex and all of that, but yeah, so you get my point. So Mars squaring this energy doesn't know which one to be right, whether to take us into our spirituality or our escapist tendency. It just charges towards whatever we put our action to, right? So if Neptune is showing you genuine spiritual truth, Mars can help you embody and live that truth through action. But if Neptune is showing you escapist fantasy, Mars will exhaust you chasing something that can't be caught. So it depends on what's going on with Neptune in your transit chart to your natal right now, and what Neptune placement you was born with. Maybe Neptune in the 1st house, 12th house, 5th house as well, 7th house as well can be really, really difficult right now. So for instance, you might become convinced that moving to Bali or some other place will solve all your problems. Mars out of balance makes you start planning immediately, quitting that job, selling those possessions, booking the tickets. But the Neptune square means you haven't considered, can you legally work there? Do you speak the language? What happens when your savings run out? You can pursue our idealized fantasy rather than make an actual plan. So there's nothing the matter with having dreams and stuff, but like with the Saturn energy, the Saturn square, it just wants us to think and plan. That's all we need to do, is plan what we're going to do, right, and not fall into the illusion. So the best use of this energy is to verify everything with trusted people who will be honest with you, get second opinions, check facts, watch videos, listen to podcasts, whatever. Do your research, right? Don't trust your own perceptions completely during this transit, as they can be unreliable. If you're going after a vision, make sure it's grounded in reality before making irreversible decisions and taking irreversible action, right? Dreams are beautiful, but Mars square Neptune can sometimes mistake dreams for destinations, right? And as I said, the moon's also making the quincunx to Mars as well, so it wants us to adjust and be flexible with our emotions, to take that brave action, right? So our feelings, which the moon represents, and our drive, our motivation, represented by Mars, pulled in an awkward direction that don't naturally work together, right? You may feel like resting, but Mars out of balance demands action, or you feel emotionally vulnerable, but Mars insists you're brave and you're okay, and you can expose your emotions. So the quincunx creates internal friction, requiring constant reset, right? Recollaboration. You can't just override your emotions and push through. That leads to breakdown, but you can't let emotions completely paralyze your action either, as this will just waste this transit's potential, right? So what do? Well, you need to find a middle path, acknowledging feelings whilst acting anyway. Moon in Gemini, where it ingresses, brings emotional complexity, scattered feelings, and the tendency to intellectualize emotions rather than feel them. Mars in Sagittarius wants brave, decisive action, and the quincunx says your emotions are saying 12 different things at the same time, and you need to act anyway. But how? How do you do this? Well, check in with your emotions before taking major action. How do I actually feel about this? Then decide, can I act despite these feelings, or does this feeling contain important information I'm ignoring? Sometimes fear isn't just fear, but sometimes fear is just fear, and we need to push through it. But as I said, sometimes fear is the intuition warning you, and you need to listen. Learning to tell the difference between the two is the work of this aspect, to work through your inner voices so you can know which one's that true intuition, right? And it can be hard and stuff. This is why, it's important to get a second opinion if you feel overwhelmed. In the UK, we've got the Samaritans, where you can talk through your problems, and you can research in any other country your helplines, but you can also call or email the Samaritans, or online chat, I think, that with them online as well. The Sun also makes a conjunction to Mars, so the best use of this energy is to schedule your biggest physical challenges so making those big changes to your eating regime, your exercise regime and stuff, or, schedule and plan out your demanding projects that you've been holding off as well, because this energy gives us the maximum energy and confidence to do the things we need to, but pace yourself before and after. Don't burn out in just 1 week as a stead, or respect full power immediately. Build gradually. Slow and steady wins the race, right? Watch out for feeling invisible, because this energy can make you feel like you can do everything, and you can be arrogant and aggressive, and belief that you don't need anyone's help, and maybe you don't, right? But at the same time, you can be a bit humble, and just watch out for exhausting yourself with this energy, right? So now I'm going to talk about the karmic meanings and soul lessons of this transit. So as I said, we're reviewing soul contracts around courage, action, belief and freedom. In past incarnations, you may have been a warrior who fought without questioning orders, the crusader who destroyed in the name of faith, the explorer who colonized indigenous lands, treating discovery as a conquest, or the teacher who imposed dogma, rigid beliefs through force rather than serving wisdom through invitation. Because this is a karmic podcast, I believe that we go through the whole spectrum of human existence, and the reason why we don't remember our past lives in depth, because if we did, we'd be crippled with, regret over the things that we may have done, who we wouldn't actually be that person now, do them things now. But, I do believe we go through the whole spectrum of lifetimes, and if we haven't lived them yet, we will. So this is why I say we shouldn't judge, we just need to understand people. But obviously we can't go around doing heinous evil acts to each other. But, when we persecute people instead of re-educating them, then the cycle just continues, right? So yeah. So the soul question Mars out of bounds asks, how will you use courage this time? Will you fight for vision or just against obstacles? Will you go after freedom while respecting others' freedom? Or will your liberation, your own freedom, come at other people's expense, by blocking other people's opinions and beliefs? And to also remember that sometimes destruction, letting go of things, is important for us to transform as well, so we can clear the dead wood so new growth can begin. So this transit asks us what needs destroying in your life and what needs protecting, while other things burned out, are kind of, you let them go, the fizzle out and all of that. So the skill isn't destruction itself. Mars out of bounds in the Mula Natsakra can destroy anything, and the skill is conscious selection of targets, destroying limitation while preserving love, burning through lies whilst maintaining truth, demolishing, letting go of outdated structures and routines whilst honouring the foundations that still serve you, right? Like controlled forests and fires, right, that are set to prevent massive wildfires. You're clearing accumulated dead matter before it becomes, motivation, full petrol for uncontrollable flames, right? But remember that uncontrolled fires, burns, require planning, boundaries and constant monitoring. Without those, you're just the arsonist, right? So in terms of our generational patterns, we often inherit our relationship with courage from our family. How did your father or family members, primary caregiver, whatever, handled conflict? Did they fight or did they run away from it? How did your mother or primary caregiver express anger? Was it permitted or repressed, kept down, bottled in? These patterns shape your warrior template, right? And Mars out of bounds in Sagittarius asks, which family patterns around action, aggression or courage am I unconsciously repeating? Maybe your family handled everything through combat, every disagreement became the war, or maybe conflict was forbidden entirely. Everyone pretended to agree while silently resenting, Now, you could be overcompensating. For instance, if your family avoided conflict, you may start fights unnecessarily. If your family was violent, you're either repeating that violence or paralyzed by the fear of your own anger. And this transit asks you to think about your relationship with anger and fighting and conflict. So you can choose conscious reactions rather than repeat them automatically or run away from using your aggression energy. Of course, we can't go around punching people, fighting people and being violent in that way, but we should stand up for ourselves and we should face conflict, because sometimes conflict is necessary, but it's the way we go around. Of course, we can use our words, right, not our hands, sort of thing. So the karmic lesson is learning to fight for rather than against. Fighting against makes enemies, fighting for creates vision. That's a subtle shift change, but it's a massive difference, right? So once again, fighting against makes enemy, but fighting for creates vision, right? And when you feel the urge, the desire, the need to fight during this transit, pause and ask, what am I fighting for? If your answer is primarily about what you're against, you're still caught in past life patterns or the generational patterns, find the positive vision that you're moving towards and then fight for that, right? So just think about where you want to direct this energy, as I said. So now I'm just going to talk about how Mars transit in Sagittarius influence our relationship, right? So this Mars in Sagittarius is happening while we're maybe all having to be around family members more, right? So let's work through this example, because Mars out of bounds can make things even more heated and stuff. So imagine, for instance, your father has always controlled family decisions without consultation, or your primary caregiver, and at Christmas dinner during this transit, he announces holiday plans for everyone without asking. Mars out of bounds in Sagittarius makes you explode, maybe. You don't get to decide for everyone anymore, and this impulse is valid. Your family does operate as a dictatorship, but the delivery creates unnecessary war. So think about there's analogy. What I'm trying to show here is that we've got to think about how we say things during this transit and react to things as well, and stand up for ourselves, because this energy wants us to, but sometimes we can do it in the wrong way. So what we could do, instead of just like exploding, we could approach your father in this scenario, the person who is causing you to you feel like they're crossing your boundaries, privately, and say, I reacted strongly at dinner because I feel like our family doesn't make decisions together. I'd like for us to operate more democratically, where we all get to make decisions, right? Or you go to that person. If you do explode, I prefer if you didn't explode, but we're all only human after all, right? So it's about trying to react to things in a reasonable way, asking them, can we try something new? Being brave with your truth, but with respectful delivery. That's using Mars consciously rather than just exploding, which out of bounds energy can make us do. In terms of friendships, your friend group may always play it safe. Same restaurants, same activities, same recycled conversations. And Mars in Sagittarius makes us, announce, I'm bored, let's do something actually interesting for once, So instead of just complaining, right, propose specific adventures, suggest something different, like I'm booking tickets for a specific event or adventure who's in. Lead by example rather than criticising from the sidelines. Some friends will join, others won't. Use this transit to find your adventure companions, the people who match your courage rather than drain your energy through constant caution, right? Committed couples, say one partner wants to quit their job and travel for 6 months and the other doesn't. They want stability and predictability. Mars out of bounds can make them just want to do it anyway without our partner's blessing, right? But I caution you to stop, because any change requires negotiation, even if you're in a relationship, right? It's important to compromise. Even if you do decide to go on a trip, you shouldn't just go with like the couple savings and use money for bills and stuff to go to travel. You know, you have to think it out. You have to compromise. Like, maybe what if we plan 3 months instead of 6? What if I line up remote work first so we have income? What would make this feel possible to you while still honouring my need for adventure? So this works in any scenario. Anything you want to propose, any change you want to do, try and, you know, compromise, honouring their needs while going after your vision. Partnership means finding solutions together, not choosing between your desire and their security. But of course, you know, some of you may decide to end a relationship, but a relationship could be toxic, you know. So again, it goes back to saying what you want to say in a respectable way, as respectable as you can, walking away from conflict, thinking about how you're going to deliver your message face to face, a voice note. A breakup, I wouldn't say you voice note that or text that, right? That's not really fair. But I do understand sometimes in some situations, if someone's abusive, we have to leave as well. So I understand. But again, you know, just choose something that is the most respectful when dealing with all relationships. In professional relationships, so imagine that a colleague keeps taking credit for teamwork, right? The work you do together. Mars out of bounds makes you confront them publicly in the next meeting by saying, actually, that was my idea. And this may satisfy your warrior impulse, but creates workplace drama, right? Instead, document your contributions clearly in writing. Going forward, speak to them privately first about sharing credit appropriately and involve management if private conversation doesn't work. Fight strategically, not aggressively. And that's the motto for all relationships, right, over the next 5.5 weeks. Fight strategically, not aggressively. So in terms of, you know, your education and learning, as I said, it's great for experiential learning hands-on through travel, adventure, whether it's physical travel or mind travel, imagination, you know, or hands-on training. But it can be a bit terrible for sitting in classrooms. But of course, if you're a student, especially, you know, under the age of 16 in the UK or 18, you know, elsewhere, 21 some places, you know, you have to go to school and stuff, you know. So, but you may find yourself daydreaming, so just pace yourself, you know. And, you know, if you finish school and you choose to learn, it's good for learning subjects like languages through immersion, skills through apprenticeship, and knowledge through doing, you know, in terms of your career. It's great for starting brave new projects, pitching ambitious ideas, or taking leadership roles that require courage, right? Great for innovative careers involving teaching, coaching, international work, or adventure-based professions. But it's dangerous for routine work that requires patience and detail and sitting still. But as I said, you have to try and pace yourself, right? And we have to pay attention to the details as well. I know it can be boring, but sometimes, you know, the difference between success and failure is all in the detail and the planning, right? And we've got the Mars square to Saturn getting us to think before we react to make that plan, so we should use that energy. In terms of our home and living situation, restlessness can make staying at home difficult. Some of you may want to be out, especially if you've got strong, you know, Leo, Aries and Sagittarius, even Gemini energy, you know. And, you know, if you can't physically travel, bring the adventure home through learning languages, cooking exotic food, you know, or hosting gatherings. Channel the energy rather than fighting it, right, you know. But again, as I said, it may not be feasible to travel physically, you know. So, you know, just like you want you want to visit China, make a Chinese meal. Mexico, and I know you may think, oh, but it's not the real thing. But, you know, it can be the best you can do right now, and that can satisfy that adventure in you, right? That need for adventure, that adventurer urge. So in terms of travel and relocation, the best transit of the year, this is for booking that trip, planning that adventure, or exploring relocation possibilities. You know, add safety protocols. As I said, hire guides if you're going somewhere in the depth of the jungle or something like that. Use the proper equipment. If you're going camping in the middle of winter, you know, you make sure you've got the proper clothes and stuff like that. Tell people your itinerary, if you want to move to a new neighborhood, check out reviews online and stuff, because courage doesn't mean stupidity, right? And as I said, with your financial planning, take one calculated risk, not 12 gambles at the same time. Invest in yourself through education, skill development or marketing, but don't speculate recklessly or commit to financial obligations you can't sustain in the long run. So planning is key, right? So now I'm just going to finish up with the best activities to do during this transit, right? So for your physical body, intense workouts, running, martial arts, competitive sports, that gives all that Mars energy somewhere to go, Adventure activities with proper safety gear like climbing, hiking, challenging walking trails and other trails and physical challenges, dance or movement practices that let you express aggression through rhythm rather than destruction, pelvic floor or other strengthening exercises, right, can be really good right now. In terms of looking after your psychological and emotional health, journal on what am I fighting for to clarify positive vision rather than just opposition. Voice memo, voice record anger and other challenging emotions before speaking them to people who would be hurt by them. Work with a therapist or healthy anger expression coach, or practice in the mirror, letting out your anger in a positive way, or do boxing, jumping, screaming in the car, anything that lets you let that aggression out. And remember, it's about being assertive when Mars is in Sagittarius out of bounds, not aggressive. Creatively, make brave, visionary work that breaks trends, and tradition, and say something that matters. Teach or lead through demonstration rather than theory and preaching, right? Showing others how to do things through living it. In terms of your spiritual practices, live your spiritual principles, through your actions and words rather than just studying them academically. Do a daily practice of one discipline that requires courage, like cold showers, difficult meditation or facing your fears. In terms of the practical changes you can make to your life, schedule one major adventure or challenge, especially during the 13th to the 18th of December when this energy is at its peak. Create outlets for intensity so you're not just exploding randomly through your day. So like I said, going out for drives, gaming, what is it? Dead by Daylight, something, those kind of games that let you channel out your aggression, right? Build, invest between intense action, because Mars can just make us want to do everything and burn out, right? So relaxation, meditation, sleeping on time, because sometimes it can make us not want to sleep and look after our body, right? So just choose what resonates, leave what doesn't. In terms of the practices I've just said, right? And just choose one that you can do consistently rather than the perfect one that you abandon after 3 days now. So now I'm just going to give you some self-reflection questions, as I said earlier, that you can ask yourself while Mars is out of bounds in Sagittarius, right? So you can ask yourself, what am I fighting for and not against? This question matters because fighting for creates, whilst fighting against destroys, right? Mars out of bounds energy has enough energy to build new worlds if directed towards positive vision. But if you're just opposing everything, you can exhaust yourself battling without creating anything meaningful. So imagine this example. You may be fighting against injustice in your workplace. That's exhausting and can make you bitter. Reframing that is, what are you fighting for? Maybe a workplace culture where everyone's contributions are valued. Same action, different frame. One drains, one energizes, So, get clear on what you're fighting, because sometimes it can just be everything is unfair, but think about what you actually want to achieve, your end goal, and stay focused on that rather than on the workplace politics, right? You can also ask, where is my courage serving others versus just serving, looking after, pleasing my ego? So hero complexes look like courage, but are actually narcissism, right? Real courage serves something beyond yourself, your family, your community, a cause that matters. Ego courage just proves you're brave, strong, or right. The difference is crucial. So imagine you may volunteer for a high profile charity that gets social media attention, but skip the unglamorous behind the scenes work that actually helps people, right? That's ego courage, performing bravery for applause rather than genuinely serving, right? So sometimes you can think we just give money to charity and that's enough. And don't get me wrong, that can be enough, right? But, you know, if we're giving money to charity and plastering it all over social media, like I give this money and stuff, you know, you can give in silence without telling people, right? You can ask yourself, am I following a vision or escaping reality? Because Mars is square to Neptune makes this question essential. Sometimes adventure is growth, sometimes it's avoidance, sometimes brave action moves you towards authentic goals, sometimes it's just running away from difficult emotions or responsibilities you're not handling. So, you know, imagine that you're quitting your job to find yourself through travel. It may be a genuine spiritual or psychological, emotional healing and seeking experience, or it can be avoiding the hard work of confronting your depression, repairing relationships, or developing actual career skills, you know. But only self-examination will reveal which one it is, or, you know. So, you know, it's important to question why you're doing things and are you just trying to escape rather than deal with reality. And it can be hard to face reality, I get it. So ultimately, Mars out of bounds in Sagittarius from the 7th of December to the 15th of January 2026, right, gives us 5.5 weeks of exceptional courage, visionary action and breakthrough ability. The first 4 weeks are especially wild because Mars operates without normal constraints. It's out of bounds, no governors, no rules on the engine, right, no speed limits, no safety rails. This transit can help us achieve what normally seems impossible, and it's a good energy taking us into the new year, right? Or it can destroy us through recklessness, right? The difference lies in whether you channel this warrior energy, right, consciously towards meaningful goals, or just let it explode randomly across your life, creating chaos, right? The Mars quincunx Jupiter warns us that we're already at capacity from previous overcommitment. The Mars square to Saturn tests our reality for our grand plans and asks us to check ourselves before we wreck ourselves and plan, right? And to let some things go. And Mars is square to Neptune creates confusion and round the direction we want to take, but the Mars trine to Chiron offers us grace and healing through brave action that proves our fears wrong. So working with this energy, as I said, choose one brave goal and go after it, not 12 different directions at the same time. One meaningful target. As I said, some of you may be able to do 2 or 3 or 4 different things. The thing, what I'm trying to get at is don't burn out and only choose things that you can follow through, right? So this can be taking one physical adventure, starting one ambitious project, or continuing it and finishing it, fighting for one cause that genuinely matters, speaking one difficult truth, or healing one fear-based limitation through brave action. Give yourself, you know, outlets for intensity, so sports, martial arts, competitive challenges and adventure activities. If you don't channel this energy consciously through chosen plans, it will just explode unconsciously through fights, maybe accidents or self-sabotage, right? So I would say between the 7th and the 14th of December, build a structure around your vision, so plan, right? As you know, Mars square Saturn is at its peak then. Mid-transit 13th to the 18th of December with the Sun Mars conjunction Titan. Schedule your biggest challenges during this week. The final phase from the 4th to the 15th of January, when Mars returns within bounds, the energy can become more manageable and directed, so it's integration time to start executing those plans and recovering from the season celebrations, right, if you've been doing all of that. So ultimately, I know the work is real and it can be hard, but the transformation that's available to you if you commit and channel this energy can help you break through barriers that seem permanent, but they're not, right? And you can go after goals that seemed impossible and create progress that carries you further than you've ever gone, right? But only if you channel, you know, use this energy consciously towards your goals rather than just oppose it, right? Or just waste it, right? So we've got exceptional courage available to us for the next month or so, or 5.5 weeks to be precise. Use it to fight for something worth fighting for, build something meaningful rather than just destroying what limits you, take calculated risks rather than reckless gambles, inspire others through brave examples whilst maintaining enough groundedness. And Saturn brings this right, Saturn square to Mars, so that we don't just become a cautionary tale. Well, you know, someone says, oh, you remember that person I told you about, you know, why they did this and it all went to crap. No, you're not going to be that person, because you're going to plan right. And I know this energy can be uncomfortable, but it's powerful, proper powerful. Channel it, use it well. So yeah, that's the end of my very in-depth analysis of all things Mars going out of bounds from the 7th of December 2025 to the 15th of January 2026. I'm Amani, your karmic astrological life coach. Take care and see you next time.